Hello. Let's give it a minute or so. I think KubeCon might reduce the audience size today. Am I audible, everyone?
Yes,
Yes,
Karthik,
yes.
you are.
We hear you.
I don't know if Sana is able to join. I hope so. Just give it a minute. Okay, let's get started. Let me quickly present the screen for the agenda. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So, just a quick recap of the action items. There, in the last two meetings, in the last meeting, we had talked about the process document for the release planning. If there are volunteers, both from SIG 1 and 2, who would like to own this, please, sign up here. By default, Sana and I have been starting to work on this. We don't have a document yet, but we have started the discussions. But if there are others from either of these six who would like to take the ownership or help out, that'll be great. There are a couple other AIs action items from the previous meeting, not the last week, but the week before, 2 weeks before, which was around both in terms of modeling as well as user experience, defining the scope priorities, and potentially may have to split working group 4 because user experience and modeling don't really fit together well. And then there was one thing for Tal and Bernard to document the current state of where we are on the modeling work, mostly to create the baseline for defining the scope and priority. So maybe I will uh, I will reach out to Tal and Bernard. I don't know. Tal is in KubeCon. Hey Sana.
Hi, Kaushik.
Hey, so I was just recapping the action items from the past, and on this first action item, I was checking if there are others who could help drive this.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so those were the action items. Again, I think one of the things, as we talked last time, which would be important, is we need to put ETAs for each of these. Otherwise, these keep dragging on, and we don't really make progress, and they get discussed, but we don't close on them. So I don't know, Sana. Like we talked last week about creating a task flow or some other structure like that. Either we do that or people self coordinate and come up with an ETA. But otherwise, and some of these are action items against you and me, Sana. So we need to hold ourselves accountable. But regardless, like my point is, we cannot keep dragging on these action items. We need a
I agree,
very
Kaushik.
well defined process.
Agree, Kaushik. To start soft, I think we can assign timelines to this ourselves in the meeting notes, just to keep it loose. And if that doesn't work again, we'll do something else, like put Kanban or something else for more reminders.
Can we do it now itself, Sana, like live, so
Yes.
that people, if they have questions or concerns, they can vote? So I think let's just go line by line. So the first one, process document, I think as a first draft, 2 weeks out from now.
Yeah, that works for
Does that
me.
sound reasonable? So it will be 20th, if I'm not wrong. This one, user experience working group. I think some of this looks like there is work that is already happening. We'll talk about in the updates. But even this one, I would say November 20, no later than that. Does it sound reasonable, Sana?
Yes, that works, Kaushik.
This one, again, I don't know where Tal and Bernard are on this, but this is just documentation of the current state. I would suggest by next week, so November 13th, although people are at KubeCon. Uh, so I don't know if people will have the cycles this week, but this is just documentation, so hopefully less of a concern. And there's already a Slack channel also focused on that. So for now, I
And I
will put
think
it
that we
as
put
13th.
together some work already. It's a matter of like bringing that work to the
Correct,
visibility in this
correct,
community.
correct. So it's just packaging things what already exists. So I'll put for now next week, and we can refine it. And the last one, I would suggest again November 20, so 2 weeks out from now. Uh, any questions, concerns, Tim?
Sorry, had it on mute. So what is expected for November 20th on number 4? Because you have each working groups. I can tell you from the ORAN, we've got a December 1st date to get what we plan on doing for release 3 to the network architecture team.
Yeah, so the last one, Tim, was modeling is a very broad bucket, and everyone wanted to understand one, scope and priorities. Second, which working group in SIG1 should be owning it. There was confusion around whether it is working group 1 versus 4 versus spread across different working groups. So, what that relationship is. And third, what the cross intersection with SIG2 is for this work, because this is a detailed work. If you go deeper into modeling, so what does that cross intersection with between SIG1 and 2 look like? So those
But
are
the
the three
response,
things.
okay, so but the responsibility is in working group 4 to define that, right?
Uh, Maybe if you think working group 4 can define it, that's fantastic.
No,
At this,
I'm not quite sure what we're doing. That's
That,
what I
that's
was.
that's what we are doing, Tim. That's what we are trying to basically clarify ourselves and define the scope and priorities for this modeling group.
Okay, so working group 4, if I understand it correctly, that's the November 13th, is document the current state of the modeling work. I think that's what's happening in working group
correct,
4, right? All right,
Right.
correct.
preferably on the Nepio wiki. All right, whatever. All right, and then from that, I guess the next step is to define the scope and priorities and ownership for modeling. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so I won't state anything of that. I thought that was for work and priorities for each working group. Sorry. Okay, it's been
Yes.
specific to modeling.
ORAN right now is going very well, thanks to you, Tim. We don't have to sort out the priorities and the scope because it's quite clear the work that you guys are focused on, and I think that's the smoothest working group, and it's going very well right now. So I think you guys are on track for ORAN group.
Okay, but this is dealing with modeling. Sorry, I missed the modeling.
Right.
I was just trying to figure out
Right.
what else we
Right.
needed. Okay, all right.
We're sorting that one out.
And this one, Sana, because we are putting the ETA, we need to have an owner. Ideally, by like this week itself. Default will be you and I in that case,
Yeah.
if nobody else is available.
Right.
Okay, Tim, was your question answered? I see you still have a raised hand.
No, sorry about that. I need to lower that.
All good. Anyone else? Any questions, thoughts on these action items, owners, ETAs? Okay. Let's, Sana, you and I keep tracking the process and the progress.
Sounds good, Kaushik.
Okay. Now, I don't know if people are available from SIG2, but it'd be good to have a structure every week in terms of SIG2 progress on the R2 execution and any dependencies, any inputs needed from SIG1. Is anyone from SIG2 available?
I
Yeah,
see
if
Bala.
let's say if Amy is
Bala.
not there, I can take. Yeah, I can. Yeah, we are making progress on the SIG2 stuff. And SIG2, SIG3. So on the expected lines. So the expected obviously the artifacts mainly material artifacts are around OAI. Then supporting multi-vendor changes in the architecture and design and APIs, and that necessitated some changes in the free FlyGC itself. And then we are making those changes. We're making changes to RAN, OAI RAN, and we make rather not changes. We are making progress on OAI RAN and core, and also we are solving the technical debt, and also making some progress on the process depth itself, such as making our CI/CD process, PR process a little bit more hygienic. So yeah, we're making progress. At this point of time, we would like to have a code like deadline end of this month, and then that will enable us to make the release on December 15th. December 15th, when I say release, that's when we go to TSC and then ask for the blessings of the TSC. And then from that point onwards, I understand, obviously, there are other processes in place through LFN to announce the product release publicly. I think we are making a progress towards that goal. Any questions on that?
I have just one follow, Balaji. On a very high level, can you give me a few liners on the use cases that were finally in decision to execute for the R2 release?
So use cases as defined by SIG1, you mean? Or
We proposed some use cases, I think, with the potential feasibility of the work, technical depth, and the short time left between that convergence and the release date. There were some decisions taken in the SIG2 for the actual implementation of a subset of that work. Where did we land on that? If you know, from a very high level perspective, we are deploying, I think, VDU, VCU. We are refining some of the use cases from the free 5GC implementations. I'm just trying to basically wrap my head around on what is R2's final scope.
yeah, from the final scope perspective, I remember we had this meeting. There is no change, Sana, if you from that original plan. Even there is no change from the plan that we discussed in our summit also. So
Okay.
at this point of time, yes, we are going to make the API changes. The one of the use case was make it multi-vendor, right? Multi-vendor, so that necessitated some abstraction in the API changes. We are doing that. And then we are obviously introducing RAN use case. That was one of the use cases.
Okay.
That is there. And then as a part of second vendor, we are introducing OAI core. That's also part of it.
Okay.
And then the technical debt. After that, the technical debt, both in case of processes and product, all the list that we presented, that's all part of the release at this point of time. So rest everything else is POC. For example, the SDK or the policy or the Helm support, all those things, they are still at the POC.
Okay,
Does it
excellent.
answer your
Thank you,
question?
Balaji. Yeah, that helps me. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Kaushik has raised hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, just maybe following up on that, right? I know given the early feedback from SIG2 that the R2 user stories defined from SIG1 were not as crisp and so forth, right? It'll be good to have a reference of how you, SIG2, not you, how SIG2 has defined the user stories. And if you have those documented, we can contrast those with how SIG1 had defined those, so that my point is, if you have a way that you would like this user stories for R3 onwards to be defined, please provide some of that template or an example set of user stories, so SIG1 can take those into account. Because what I worry is we'll go into R3 planning and some of the same confusion and issues will persist. So we need to document the expectations of SIG2 in terms of the structure of user stories, so SIG1 can use that template moving forward.
Yeah. Actually, that's a
Excellent.
great idea.
Thanks, Kaushik.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Kaushik. So to answer to your first question, SIG2 and SIG3, all our items are in Jira. So any work item that we do is not Jira, sorry, GitHub by issues. I keep switching between my internal and external work, so I keep missing that. So all our issues we have listed in our GitHub issues. There is a project board for that. But I really liked your suggestion of correlating our epics versus the expectations of SIG1, saying that's where we can join the dots. We can define an epic in SIG2 and we can say, these are the epics that are fulfilling these use cases defined by SIG1. I really like that idea. Probably we should do that for SIG3 onwards, Kaushik. I really like it. And as far as the giving the template goes, probably, yeah, we can discuss it, and then we can provide a template. We can define the same thing in the same board as for we can create in the same project, but as a different board for SIG architecture. We could do that as well. I think I really like it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
so
Kaushik.
Bala, can you take that as an action item and come back, whatever is like 2-3 weeks out, an ETA of sorts?
Sure. Regarding coming
The
out.
template for the user stories epics for SIG
Okay, got
architecture.
it. I'll do that. Yes.
Thank you. I'll
Yes,
just
please.
put a placeholder here so we don't forget. We can discuss,
Yes.
bring that
Yes.
up in the next SIG1 meeting.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll do that.
Hey, Bala. So if you could work with me on that, because I was doing the same thing where I was going to identify the user stories, right, that would come for the network architecture, and then
Yeah.
put those over into to the Jira that would start the correlation back there. So I'll work with you on that just to, because I was trying to have the same problem, or not the problem, but going to solve the same issue, tying it
Okay.
back to what was defined in the use cases that come from the SIG, right? With the user stories and tasks that gets defined into the from SIG2.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, let's work together on that.
Ravi, you have a raised hand?
Yeah, no, just trying to reiterate the same point. I don't think we have a document for the user stories for R2 yet, right? I mean, because we talk about this multi-vendor orchestration, OI, 3.5GC, but the big picture is I think has to be captured. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I don't know, from a technical depth perspective, it does any others. It's primarily filling the gaps,
Yep.
I guess. But
I
at least
agree. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Ravi, I
So-
agree with you. So Balaji, wherever that board is, where you have defined all these epics for your execution, I think would be nice to share that link so that all the other groups who are not actually participating in the SIG automation meetings regularly could keep an eye
Yes.
on what's coming in R2.
Absolutely. So I think so I will come up. Yes, I will do that, Sana. Thank you so much. That makes total sense. And I'll also come up with a template. Obviously, work with Tim. Share the ideas with Tim as well. So come up with a template where we can define a template for the user stories from the SIG one. The way my mental mind map is, it is not an executable user story. It's more of a epic kind of a thing. This is what you want. This is what the industry wants. This is what the use case is. This is what the impact is. This is why it is important. These are the stakeholders. It is at that level. And then let's create a board for that, for SIG architecture. I will come up with all those things. I'll come with the document and stuff. And then once we do that, the SIG automation group is the actual execution group. Then when we define the epics and stories there, we can correlate between these are the epics defined, these are the actual work items defined in SIG2, which is going to satisfy the use cases defined by the SIG architecture in this board. So I think that's where we will join the dots and everybody can understand the high level intent, high level use case that we are solving from the industry perspective, and also the execution pieces that we're going to define in the SIG automation board, and they can see the correlation. I really like that.
Okay, perfect. Kaushik, can you update the action item slightly more? Besides template, we should also have a look into the Apex user stories that are actually finalized for R2. So something like a board, or where SIG architecture can review the final use cases picked up for the next release, and where we can create that mind map like Balaji mentioned.
Yeah, I'll come up with that process. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Balaji.
So I'm gonna put this link here, the board that we are using right now in our chat right now. So this is the board we are using. So I on that note, I also want to bring out this point, Kaushik, to your the modeling group, right? It also becomes the immediate thing is to review whatever we have done for. It's kind of a slightly reverse engineering at this point of time, because we already have defined the APIs for RAN and core based on our R1 implementation and based on what is defined in 3GPP, etc. So we are it's already there. I think some of them are already merged. We are using it for the execution purpose. So that's what we are going to use as a common model for RAN and core. With that said, we using that as a reference, creating an information model. It's obviously we are using CRDs, right? So this is data model at this point of time. Using that as a base, creating an information model, maybe a first action item for the modeling group. And if they want to make any suggestions, any changes or any suggestions, that would be great. We can take it up for R3. Since in your if you scroll up a bit, I think scroll up or scroll down, wherever you are saying that action item for modeling group. Yeah, I think that may be one of the first things that modeling group may want to undertake. Look at the existing abstraction that we created as a data model for RAN and core, and reverse engineer and come up with the information model. And then that may be a first step. And for R3 onwards, if they want to augment it, they could do it there. Then we can change it. We can make in a regular forward engineering process.
Yeah, Balaji, that's a good feedback. I think a good idea, a good thing that is happening right now in this work group is that Tall is also a part of it, and I think he's also familiar with the information models created at the lower level, at the CRD level. And this group's focus is also to create the mapping between a much higher level modelings, for example, Tosca, and create that mapping with how the KRM and CRD's information models will be translated into that. So I think that's the work that they're trying to bridge as well. So if you want to help more, I think that's a good opportunity. But I think Tall being there is actually gathering the feedback from what you guys have implemented right at the moment.
Yes. So yeah, it's definitely in good hands. What I just wanted to suggest, since there was their scope and priorities, maybe that may be the first thing that group may want to undertake. I'm definitely definitely happy it's in good hands. Yeah.
Yes, do sync up with them in case you want to contribute some more ideas and suggestions. I think that's very useful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Balaji.
Yeah, thank you, Sana.
Thank you. Okay, should we get into the working group updates, Sana?
Yes, let's do that, Kaushik.
Okay, so on working group one, Sana, keep me honest, but my sense is there hasn't been a periodic meeting of sorts. The group has been, we have identified the key folks, but there hasn't been, have you been meeting? Has there been any
No,
progress
no,
towards
Kaushik.
sharing?
Nothing has been done. All I'll share with you is that when the summit was coming together, we put together an architectural design, and something like that had to continue discussions with the broader community to align on various south, east, west in interfaces and our APIs and our cross pollination with other projects that includes own app or that includes ORAN at a much higher level, like in a higher level than how we look at that in the working groups individually, going deeper dive into that. So a cadence has to be established on the discussions on creating documentation, architectural representations, and our cross-pollination ideas with the other projects. And this was also in discussions that since we became a part of the LFN, there are some responsibilities coming on the SIG leads to present this architecture and this vision and how we interact with the rest of the world to the other projects, including TAC. And in my mind, I was waiting, Kaushik, for the results for elections so that we can take it with the new leads and assign responsibilities for some of the representations in the cross projects as well. So the work has not started yet. It's TBD, and let's circle back on that. A regular meeting cadence has to be established. Doesn't have to be every week, but every 2 weeks. We can continue to evolve around the ongoing developments of the work happening in other working groups and to form the documentation and the vision that we tried to bring together in the summit. And these are just my thoughts. I'm happy to see thoughts from everybody else. What should SIG architecture group be working on? To me, it's a slow evolution and a constantly changing architectural vision that we need to constantly update and refine as the community evolves, and the scope for Nephew is actually evolving as well at this time. So it's evolutionary architecture at this point.
Yeah, no, understood, Sana. I think maybe just one thing to keep in mind is the work backwards plan that we had talked about last time for R3. If we need to start R3 in Jan, then we need to really have a very clear architecture view, North Star, before that, and then we can then segment how much of that fits into R3 planning and so forth. Right. So some of the pre-work from working group one is important for R3 planning. And so whatever that scope is, at least that we should kickstart without necessarily blocking on the elections. I know elections are around the corner, but in a way, you, Sana, you, Eric, Bernard, like I'm sure you'll continue helping out, whatever be
Of
the
course.
ownership in terms of chair and so forth moving forward. So I would recommend if we could not, I would request if we could not block on the chair process for working group one and just keep iterating given the R3 planning that is upcoming.
Okay, so for the architectural part, Kaushik, I'm completely aligned. I think I will set a poll for a cadence for meetings and evolve around the initial architectural model that we tried to create and refine it further so that more people are aligned on those ideas. Uh, do you want us to have a weekly meeting for this, or a bi-weekly meeting on this subject would be enough?
I would suggest to start with weekly, just have a very structured process, and then if you are able to uh, create that kind of a template, then maybe reducing the frequency to bi-weekly over time. But
Right.
I think given R3 planning around the corner, it is important to kickstart that process.
Right, right. I will set the poll to find the perfect times for the SIG architecture, and I will start the cadence for the meetings. And I hope that we can have some contribution from the other telcos as well in the work that we are doing there.
Perfect. I took that as an AI against you, Sana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Working group two.
One question here, Kaushik.
Oh
I
yeah,
just raised
Ravi.
my hand. Yeah. So this architectural view, because right now we are doing something with ORAN, trying to integrate, Nephew and ORAN, and coming up with one architectural variant that will be probably, more specific to ORAN. and Nephew. So with this architecture view, are we saying that the service orchestration or end-to-end service orchestration is kind of standards agnostic, and we would want to define an open API? Is that the view? I know the view that you had, but in that during the technical summits, but that I think still had some SDO specific components there. So the question is like, how do we kind of make this SDO neutral, or then it basically then say, okay, there are these other variants that we do with ORAN or probably with some other HC or something like that. What is the overall goal with this architectural view?
So
That
I will share my goal, Ravi, and I don't know if this is the right vision or not. Because there are, so when we try to work on that architecture, even for the summit presentation, I know that there were a lot of open questions around Nephew's final scope, and which is all evolving at the moment. So whatever document we present, whatever architectural vision we present would be the best effort as we know at that point in time. So for example, if R3 is ahead of us, at this point in time, whatever is our best understanding on the Nephew scope, which would of course include all the work that is happening in the ORAN and the modeling groups and however other stuff is evolving, would represent that architectural vision at that point. And as I said, it's the evolutionary architecture, which means that we'll constantly update the scope and interfaces as the world of Nephew is converging and evolving around its definitive scope. So if I try to explain your answers just a little higher level, we are trying to intersect with 3GPP specs, we are trying to intersect with ONAP. What would be the model on which we can intersect with them? What would be those open APIs? Maybe we can look at those interfaces and we can say, this interface for this work is a potential opportunity to be brought into R3. Let's focus on this API as well. Include that in the scope because we are working on, for example, ORAN deployment. What would be the model for a higher level service orchestrator or network slicing orchestrator to invoke that API? What modeling and what information models would they be using to invoke that? To basically facilitate that discussion, this group is important, and that vision is important for others to basically connect Nephew with the broader ecosystem of the other technologies and standards. I hope that answers your question, right? This is the best type of evolutionary architecture that we'll constantly update and continue to present and work on it.
Sure. I think, in that sense, and probably ORAN just becomes one of the use cases that you have intersection point with other SDOs and stuff. So,
and whatever we present would 100% align with the ORAN architecture at all times, which is also evolving. And I'm seeing this is all rolling at the moment.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Ravi. One thing, Sana, we should be a little bit deliberate on is, given ORAN also is developing architecture, although scope to ORAN, we should make sure whatever work that first working group will be doing on the overarching architecture, we should just make sure there is no overlap, or we should just share the knowledge and information across those two working groups rather.
Absolutely. So I'm quite close to working group 2 right now for the cross-pollinating people. I don't know who else is cross-pollinating between ORAN and architecture, but that would be a very important part, Kaushik, that the architecture group has some cross-pollination with the other working groups so that we are all aligned on the evolving architecture. And I probably need to recruit more people into the work group 1 so that we can evolve that architectural vision in a way that reflects the story from the other working groups. ORAN being most important at this time, but the modeling would also become very important at some stage to basically contribute their ideas into the vision.
Yeah, no, that sounds fine. Okay, so moving on, working group 2, ORAN.
Yeah, so we're progressing with the discussion on the high level architecture. A lot of it is how do we depict the various Nephew enablers within the existing ORAN architecture. But I think we're making some good progress on this. We should come to completion. I would hope that we were able to come to completion this week on that description, so we can get into some objectives of what we want to do for release 3, and then do some identification of the user stories or use cases for release 3. I was trying to do release 3 and release 4 for 2024. But I think we'll just step back and do release 3 first, get everyone set because we're all getting to know each other, and then we'll push to try to give a year out to you guys for the network architecture team in terms of planning. But right now we'll just focus on release 3 planning. And that's scheduled. The team knows that they have a deadline by December 1st to get that back to the network architecture team. We also received, I asked questions from the network automation team as to when they need their deliverables for release 3. They've given us a target date of January 31st of next year to do that. And they've also given us a list of deliverables that they would like to see. We've documented all that. We'll start working on that as soon as we get done with the identification of the user stories and try to work to that. Right now, the team thinks that January 31st date is a reasonable date, but we haven't really dwelled too far into the deliverables right now. We knew some were there, some new, but we'll work through them. That's about everything.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that update, Tim. One question. You said end of this week, and you also said December 1st for starting the work with SIG1. Can you help maybe clarify what
Yeah.
those two
So we've been
deliverables?
having this. Yeah, we've been having discussions on what the ORAN integration architecture would look like. Just the architecture. We were trying to do objectives. We said we stepped back and said, let's start talking about just a high level architecture of how we would want to depict and have meaning for the ORAN integration using NetBio enablers, like which pieces, like the NFO or what does the NFO look like? What does the FOCOM look like? What does the IMS look like? What does the DMS look like? What does ORAN NFs look like? And what do they use with the enablers that NetBio provides, right? And how do we depict that? I think we've come to some consensus to that over the last week or so that we should probably be able to drive to conclusion this week. There's other work that we have to do now once we've come to that consensus is we've got to make sure we identify a good set of objectives that we want to do for release 3 and what are the user stories to support those objectives so that we can at least state at this point in time what does release 3 look like, and we can bring that back to the network.
Understood. So this week will be high level architecture, and then December 1st is the cross
We'll have the
pollination.
objectives. We'll have the objectives of the user stories identified, right? For you guys, for the network architecture team to verify or agree to whatever we do here. What I didn't want to do was have the infamous swing going through the middle of the tree, right? So I looked to this group here to make sure that the expectations are being met, that you're not expecting something different out of release 3.
Understood. That's a good point. Just maybe one input is, in general, all of these working groups don't have to initially worry about R3. How do you fit into the release planning is a follow-through discussion. We should just look at the overarching focus of whatever the high-level architecture objectives. They shouldn't have to be confined to a particular release. And then a working group 3 will have to now collate this information from different working groups, and then work to put together a structure for R3 in concert with SIG2. So that's the relationship that Sana and I have envisioned. So I know it's not like a very strict boundary per se, but as a process, we should try to follow this template.
Yeah, and I tried to give a little bit broader horizon, right, to what an ORAN architecture integration would look like. But I don't think the team is really they have to have something to grasp onto first, right? And so that's why I kind of stepped back from just saying what 2024 would look like or 2025 and just say, okay, let's just say what 2023 looks like. And then we'll build into that broader vision because you got to have at least a basis to go with. And I think that's what my impression is where the group is at right now. We're getting to feel comfortable, one with each other, and two with the processes, right? And so I'll get you there. It's just you know, uh, you're dealing with people that, team members that, just have various levels of degree of comfort, right? So it just can't do it all at once. It's kind of like, when you had your first release of Nepio, right, with the POC, right? You didn't know what Nepio was going to look like 20 years down the road. So I think that's where we're at, just the involvement of the team. Does that make
Yeah.
sense, Karthik?
Yeah, no, fully understand. I think that makes sense. And that's anything else on SIG2, Tim? Sorry, working group.
Sorry, one question for Tim. When you're working with the Oren, do you have connection to Seshu in OSC PTL about this work?
Yeah, we've been talking with Sechu.
Okay,
So he's also part of the group with.
I know, but I participate in some of the OSC SMO meeting, but not concrete progress. Yes, that's why I'm asking you. Okay.
No. So
Okay.
I don't know if, I know that Robbie and Bala have been, active in the release, or not the SIG2, the ORAN integration. So I don't know if they have any other comments on that, but um, that's at least what my current progress that I would report.
No, nothing from my end,
Okay.
Tim. I think you summarized it well. Thanks.
Yeah, same. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else who's interested in joining and participating the working group? The sessions are 8 a.m. Pacific Wednesday, and Tim and the team has created some excellent documentation around the ORAN architecture. There are lots of comments and questions going on, which is helping, like Tim describe the convergence and understanding of the scope and the architecture on the ORAN at the moment. So if anybody else is interested in contributing or learning or listening in that sessions, I think that would be a good idea for you to learn more on that work that's going on. Back to you, Kaushik.
Perfect. Just moving on, somewhat related to the previous discussion on R3 planning. So, Sana, we had talked about having the need to reconvene working group 3 for R3 planning. Maybe one thing, instead of just one thing that we discussed was work backwards plan from a date that we need to provide the structure for SIG2 for R3. But the second thing we should also do is what are the key inputs that we need from each of the working groups to really help streamline the R3 planning for this working group 3? Because right
Receive a
now we
set
are
of
just,
user stories. And
yeah,
then I think my in my mind, the work group 3 was supposed to brainstorm more on the user stories, consume the template that, for example, Balaji or the other SIG automation group would have put together, try to convert the user stories more into that template, and to finally propose the subset of that user stories or whatever is the most relevant to the next release context, create that document and produce that for SIG automation. And we also discussed, Kaushik, that the work group 3 has to be a joint effort by SIG architecture and SIG automation together. So the leads have to be cross-pollinating.
yeah. So all of what you say makes sense. My question was a little bit different, right? So, so we'll get, let's say, from Bala and team on the template. We'll then structure the working group 3 to be inclusive of both SIG 1 and 2. But what do we need as base information from each of the SIG1 working groups, right? Like, for example, we can say, hey, working group 1 and 2, both architecture groups, they need to produce a high level architecture spec that has been aligned to with respective whatever other communities, right? As an example, for working group 4, it should be that, hey, we need the UX and potentially modeling, if modeling is part of working group 4 or not, but like whatever be the high level scope of work, right? As an example, or prioritize scope of work. It doesn't have to be scope of work for R3. And then similarly for last working group, it will be around service assurance, right? Like what should be the objective? So I think we should, maybe what would help is create a little bit of a template and structure of what are the expectations from each of the working groups that then this working group 3 should consume and then drive rest of the forward process.
Right,
Does that make
right,
sense?
and right, and that's why I said they need to produce user stories. Like I said, Tim is already working on finalizing his user stories and objectives for that for R3 by December 1st. So if every group does that, that could become the working material for work group 3 to basically finalize and refine and construct the actual R3 scope and work. Kaushik, that explains what I was trying to say as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Maybe we should put that same level of structure for other working groups, right? It's great that
Exactly.
Quran is creating, planning to deliver the user stories by 1st of December. We need that structure for other working groups because
Exactly.
otherwise working group 3 will we can reconvene, but we won't have the material in place to really make progress.
Right. For all working groups, we can expect to receive some user stories as input for work group 3 to brainstorm and refine on. I believe the work group 1, the architecture work group, doesn't necessarily produce user stories, but they influence the user stories of the other working groups. But it does present a vision that actually aligns with the R3 scope and the ongoing work with other working groups. Like it reflects the current picture of the things at the state and a true representation of the architecture at that stage, where things are and how things are evolving. And the outcome of that is an architectural reference diagram that represent the current work and the future work in a way that is aligned with the other working groups' user stories at that point. So the output of work group 1 is not user stories. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So maybe just to recap, right? Here is the timeline that I had in mind. Just as a proposal, mid of next week, let's say November 15th, SIG2 gives us the input in terms of the template that they're expecting for user stories moving forward. Each of the working groups consumes that template as well as whatever template that SIG1 originally had for R2 planning. We just
Right.
collate it, and then each of the working groups then consumes that template, produces the outcome in terms of the high level user stories by, let's say, 1st of December. And then our working group 3, SIG1 plus 2 start to meet starting, let's say, first week of December to then start the planning for R3. Is that rough? Is that timeline reasonable from your
Yes,
standpoint?
yes, Kaushik, that's perfect. That's
Okay.
perfect.
So we should then
Let's
also
put the December.
document this in the,
Yeah,
we should also
I'm sorry.
document this in the process document that we talked about, like just as a structure, but also specific guarded timelines for R3. And then we can evolve that for future R4 plus as a process.
Absolutely. That would become a process then, with that cadence and that milestones
Yeah, I
built
will
into
do
that.
that. In fact, I will do that this week, and I'll share the process document template with you, Sana,
Okay.
and we'll put certain timelines for R3 with a work backwards plan.
Okay, perfect. Kaushik, let's put the timelines for user stories to be defined by December 1st for all other work groups as well. If they don't
Yeah,
have user stories, that's fine. But if they have something to contribute for the next release, that's what they can do by this deadline. If they don't deliver by this deadline, means that we might not be able to incorporate the user stories coming from those work groups for that release, and which should also be fine, depending on where their work is evolving and how fast or slow the work is evolving.
perfect. Sounds like a plan. Anyone else has thoughts, ideas on this, Tim?
Tim has raised hand.
Yeah, so I will say that, you know, I would hope, and I understand, again, we're learning to crawl, right? So I'm perfectly fine with that. But from this working group and this roadmap, right? One of the things that I would need, and I would just be selfish as the ORAN integration, that I would need is just an understanding of what enablers are available to me for integration, right? For example, some of the service assurance, maybe the observability framework doesn't come into isn't available, right? Really, or usable, available, whatever we want to call it, that maybe till release 4. And I say, okay, that's fine. we'll figure out a way to use it in release 4, something like that, right? And so I'm looking for some dependencies of what other working groups and what network automation, dreamed up in their kitchen to use to do some of the ORAN integration use cases, right? And so this will be, for me, this is an important group in that I'm able to see what other working groups are doing, what assets are available from them to be used for the ORAN integration team, right? Because try not to use things that aren't, somewhat cooked unless we're doing it as a POC effort, specifically for a release. Does that make sense? Maybe not then. I'm not hearing anything. So
No, it does make sense, Tim. It did make sense to me, but I think it's all coming together.
yeah,
What you're looking
and
for, I think, would evolve as well.
yeah. So this isn't just like a one and done, right? So I would expect that we're going to continually evolve this thing, and hopefully, as we get a little bit more mature, right? The deliverables are beyond one release in advance. So it'll be 2 releases, and maybe we can get a year or so out, right?
Absolutely.
Plan.
Absolutely. We're all evolving, we're all learning, we're all setting our foot on the ground firmly at this stage, and we are all finding that model to work more cohesively like a well-oiled machine eventually. So you're on track and you're well ahead of your curve, Tim. This work group is going very well so far.
Yeah, I think I agree with Sana. I'm sorry, I was finding my unmute button. It took me a little bit longer. Not to disagree with you, Tim. Okay, so in the interest of time, right? Let's keep moving. So working group 4, there were a few updates in terms of requirements document and so forth.
Yeah, Sandeep here. Yeah, so I shared one of the document for the working group 4 scope and requirement last Monday, and I shared in the Slack channel. Also, last Tuesday we reviewed it. I shared with Bernard, Tom, and other folks, and we had a meeting because we have our working group 4 meeting initially planned for Tuesday. Every Tuesday we are having it. So last Tuesday we had it. If you are okay, I can just share the document and run through that slide in 1 or 2 minutes if you're okay, and just see what are the overall thing which we are doing, and if you can just give us inputs on that, that would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. I think 2-3 minutes is fine.
Yeah. All right, so this document is already there in the Slack channel, and actually that here link also takes you here. Okay, so last week we had a 1-hour discussion on this, and Bernard and all gave us some feedbacks, and I incorporated that. Few of the things which we are trying to do it, for example, objective and all the things. So basically, what are the points user is going to interact with an FU or the system? I will not call it the user. We got an input that we should call it as a system, where any app or any other system can also interact with the FU, and what kind of experience it has. So on those lines, we are trying to define the objective. We can correct it if it is something beyond that. So for example, all possible users or the system points of the NFU, all possible input standards of the NFU, north, east, south, west interfaces where others system will interact with NFU. NFU modeling, we have put it here. We had initial discussion. We'll talk about it separately if he wants. And then NFU UI functions, which we want, functions and operation, if you want to support, and all possible tools that helps to have better user experience, like for example, Helm onboarding and conversion and all those things. So these are the lines on which we had a discussion. If I mean, you can give offline comment, I'll just running through it, right? So we try to define all the interfaces, the system point where the other people or the system will interact with an FU, like telecom operator system, NF vendor system, cloud infrastructure system, and system integrator system. So few of the inputs came from the other people like Bala and all those things. So I incorporated that. I'm just running through, I'm not talking, I'm not taking feedback, so that even you give us later the feedback. Bernard asked us to have a clear use case diagram where, the flow diagram where user interact with the NFU system. What are the point where it interacts? So I try to document that. So for example, where it creates infra intent, when it gets workload intent. Even I try to create when it create a packet variant set. today I documented that maybe the point where the other system like service assurance, analytics system, service orchestration, and all those things interact with system, right? And what kind of API they will use, we can talk about that, and we can think about on those lines. And then I try to have some sort of input in standards, like how the user will provide inputs, and are we following any standard for that, so that across the board, whether it's any system and all those things, they follow the same standards. So I try to give an example of 28.501 management orchestration 5G NRM 3GPP standard. But this is just an example. The other standard, like team told in the meeting, that ORN and all that can come into picture. Then the Nephew interfaces, what kind of interfaces Nephew will have. I think some of those will fall in some other category, I'm not sure, but still have we documented that. Northbound, southbound, and east-west, like for example, the other load balancer and all those things. Then we had NFU modeling, we discussed, as you know, Tall and is taking care of this. And then NFU toolings, for example, how the onboarding process of other system will be okay in NFU, like for example, ease of onboarding, ease of migration from the other deployment technologies such as Helm and all those things into NFU web deployment, ease of creating a packages, versions, logging, and even the lifecycle management. Can we have tooling around that is what we discussed. And then finally, we had an NFU UI where we thought we stretched our imagination or all possible things where user will interact and have some sort of experience. So for example, can we have a step-by-step creation of KPD function, KPD kind of providing the capacity information from the UI, and all of the UI function which we can thought about it, like topology viewer, viewing the NF functions. The people gave a input that why can't we have a day 2 UI, a view in the UI, like for example, whatever the intent we suggested, can we know what is the actual status of those intent? So on those lines we discussed. So yeah, that's all. I tried to run quickly within 2 minutes. I'm not sure how, I mean, on these lines, I'm seeking feedback from you all. I mean, especially Sana and Kaushik. So if you can have a time and see all these documents and provide your inputs, that will be great. Yeah, that's all.
Sandeep, if the document is shared, sorry, a very quick comment. If the document is shared, allow it for open comments. I think people will have more ideas to ask questions. And I had a very quick comment on the first slide. Okay, this slide where it says north, south, east, west interfaces to Nephew. Basically, you're trying to describe the behavior in which those interfaces will be consumed. Because it's intersecting with the other working groups as well. Yes. But this working group is really focusing on the interfaces already defined, described, but you are now defining the mechanisms in which those interfaces could be consumed. So consumption of north, south, east, west interfaces of Nephew. And when I look at the rest of your document, that's exactly what you're doing. So it's just by be a correction to the terms. Okay. That's all.
Okay, I'll correct it. Sure. I mean, yes, I mean, time is very less, 2 minutes, so I'm not seeking all the inputs now. I think this document is open for comment. I have given the link in this agenda document itself. You can go through that and provide all the offline comment, and also suggest me, I mean, which are not part, should not be part of it, should be part of it, and anything, so that tomorrow we have a meeting, I can take on them. Yeah.
One quick comment. This is great. Thank you, Sandeep. One thing, the Nephew UI, thinking about the raise this topic to SIG security tomorrow. About the UI, you need some kind of a security, single sign-on, authentication, authorization. I probably ask the Raul to consider this.
Okay.
For security.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim also has a raised hand.
Yeah, just real quick. So I know that like in SIG network architecture on the drive, we've got, task force service assurance, which I assume that's where their artifacts are in, and there's working group 2 ORAN that's there. Could tooling, I don't know where you guys are squirreling away your stuff, so
yeah.
Somehow can we all squirrel away our stuff like there?
I mean, tooling, you asking anything on tooling?
Well, I don't see any folders like for the tooling that that would be there. I would have thought I'd saw task force tooling or task force modeling or whatever.
We do
Whatever
have
we're talking about here.
yeah, we do have that. We have made some significant process on that. We have a lot of POCs on that regarding the Helm. I mean, tools for Helm to operator conversion and Flux and Red Hat operator.
I get it. I was
Yeah.
saying that under the SIG network architecture Google Drive, I just didn't know where
Ah,
your collateral was located, right? I know where service assurance is, I know where ORAN stuff is, but I didn't know where you guys had your drives at, right? And it should that be part of the SIG network architecture drive? Since you're part of the work group, I would have expected to see the task force here. If that's not the case, that's fine. Just kind
yeah,
of need to
I
know
will try
where
to
all that
find it.
stuff's at.
Yeah, I'll try to find it out and share it. We have a Slack channel. Maybe we can try to do that. Yeah, I'll put that updated thing in the SIG architecture Slack channel when I find it.
Or on the external piece where, I think there's was it up here? It's the external SIG network architecture, working group 4, you got experience in modeling, and maybe just if there's a drive there, put the link there.
Okay.
That's in that one document that shows where all the artifacts are being developed, right?
Sure. I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it from my point, my update.
Cool. Thank you, Sandeep. How should we do it? We are at time. Working group 5 has not been able to provide updates, I think, the last time as well. Are people okay to go over? Can quickly cover working group 5?
I think that should be
Kaushik, I have another meeting I have to jump on. I'll drop, and you guys continue if you have time to basically go over the work group 5 details.
Yeah, I think that's even I'll need to drop in couple minutes, but why don't people on the last working group start their updates?
Yep, sure, Kaushik. So I'll be very quick on our updates. So we are able to set our objectives, our interest for our work group. So that we already concluded and agreed. And now we are focusing on our use case, that is the impact analysis. So yeah, last meeting and before to that, we were continually trying to detail it out. We are asking more questions and trying to fill the gaps. So currently we are in process in finalizing the use case, and we are continuously discussing on it. So yeah, this was the quick update from the work group 5. Yeah, Kaushik.
Okay, that's great. Are you looking for anything from the larger Sigmund community?
Currently, no. But we will update this once if we need anything.
Okay, and
Yeah.
generally for the R3 planning, as we discussed, by December 1st, having the high level user stories, do you think you would be on track?
Yeah, that we need to discuss among the group, and accordingly I'll update, or any time is needed, then I'll inform you back.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just generally, once I share the process document, the timeline should become clear, and I would request each of the working groups to use those for your plannings.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Subhash.
Thank you,
Okay,
Kaushik.
we are a little bit over time. Tim?
No,
You
I
were
found it.
raised.
So he just said, yeah. So we just said, do you have the service assurance objectives already defined, and it's in that your design considerations document. Is that correct, Subhash?
Yeah, right, Tim.
Okay. All right. That's what I need to know. Thanks. Man.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you maybe, Subhash, reshare the objectives with the larger group, either on the Slack channel or just hyperlink in the agenda doc?
Sure, of course, I will do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. We will start to work on the action items with ETAs now, and we'll keep pestering some of you who are owning the rest of the action items. So please bear with us. But this is important to have a clear process and rigor around this. So thank you, and look forward to meeting you all next week.
Thanks, Kaushik.
Bye bye.